Hey guys, Kathy Biehl of EmpowermentUnlimited.net, looking at the chart of Supreme Court Justice Samuel Alito, who has been in the news multiple times this week because of disclosures about trips he has taken, funded by others that he has not disclosed. One broke earlier in the week. ProPublica broke the story that he had gone to Alaska with a man named Paul Singer, whom Leonard Leo, who seems to be the architect of so many of these situations, introduced him to or made the trip happen. So he goes to Alaska on this very fancy trip, has $1,000 wine, chip ice off of glaciers for their martinis. And he is asked to comment on the story and doesn't, but gets something published in the Wall Street Journal the night before the article broke out. And now what has prompted me actually looking at this is that CNN is reporting that after he wrote the majority opinion in Dobbs v. Jackson Women's Health last year, the one that gutted abortion rights that had been in place for 50 years, he went to Rome, funded by a religious group that has lobbied in front of the court a lot. So I thought, okay, let's look at his chart. And you will not be surprised to know that there is really significant activity going on. And we're going to start with Pluto in Leo in the 8th house of other people's money. Mars has just moved across that. It moved there in mid-June. Mars has just triggered the May and November Scorpio eclipses, which went across Justice Alito's 410 axis, which has to do with his place in the world. So I would expect that the reporting was extremely active, passionate during that point. That was the week before I am recording this. And now we have Venus, which rules money and relationships, headed for a conjunction with that Pluto. So we have mere mortal amounts of money and huge amounts of money and power. This isn't just a fleeting aspect because Venus is going retrograde in July, and she's going to cross over this point 3 times. She actually crosses that Pluto June 23rd and 24th. I would expect more to come as we get toward the weekend, although this latest disclosure is probably part of that building aspect. Then after she retrogrades on July 22nd, she goes back over this spot again in his house of other people's money from August 6th to 9th. And then when she's direct again in mid-September. Watch for more to come out, but there's more going on than just the Venus retrograde teeing this up. Notice that Mars has just recently crossed over that Pluto. Mars has just recently shaken up, triggered a bunch of things from the Scorpio and Taurus lunar eclipses in May and November. And recall that the one in November was on the day of the midterms in the United States. So Mars is going to very soon go into Virgo, and in the 8th house of other people's money, it's going to cross Justice Alito's Saturn. Saturn in your chart is where you feel the least competent or comfortable when you're really young. It's a place where you work really, really hard. Mars going across that could actually bring more of an investigative push. It could actually bring, as impossible as this seems, action on the position, his position as judge, Saturn, and this happens August 3rd. Before we go through, and there's actually a timeline here, okay? So there's one more piece I want to add into it, and then we'll go through how it's going to, how the clockwork is going to play out. So as this news is breaking, oh, by the way, I have run transits for the second article, the CNN disclosure about the trip to Rome. So this has Saturn and Jupiter still in a sextile, an opportunity aspect, with Saturn being in his second house of personal resources, and Jupiter being in his house of home and security. They're in a sextile, and they are exactly in conjunct. Pardon my crappy drawing. Someday I will figure out what beautiful technology all the other astrologers use. But this is, each of these are in an inconjunct with his South Node in Libra in the 9th house. South Node is default behavior. It's what you should be moving away from. In the 9th house, life philosophy, the law, relationship to the courts. This is a configuration called a finger of God. So there is something going on about money, big money, power and money, influence and money coming together and pointing at agreements that have been in place. South Node in Libra. This is not a one-time aspect. We're going to have it again next year because Saturn is retrograde. So let me just go through what is happening. Oh, no, there's one other piece, and then we're going to go through the timeline. The other piece is, notice that as this news comes out, the sun is exactly on Alito's Uranus and his 7th house cusp. So the sun is illuminating alliances, disruptive alliances, and possibly, I'm sure he considers it, open enemies with the press coming at him. So at the time of this disclosure, we have money on money in the 8th house. We have these shocking disclosures coming out shown by the sun on Uranus. We have Saturn and Jupiter connecting power and money, and both of them pointing to his South Node in Libra in the house of the courts. So here's how it's going to play out. Venus crosses over that Pluto July 23rd and 24th. August 3rd, Mars joins up with his Saturn. And before anybody argues or complains, there's a lot more going on than this, but this is just the big stuff for a quickie look. Then, August 6th through 9th, Venus retrograde goes back over that Pluto, and more comes out. Then, mid-September, Venus, now direct, goes back over that Pluto one more time. Then we have a solar eclipse at the beginning of October that's on his Neptune in the 9th house. His Neptune that's actually, it's not quite on the doorway to his 10th house, but this eclipse is between those two things. So there's something happening that pulls in transiting Chiron in his 3rd house of communications. So he's been exceedingly defensive and angry and bombastic and combative in his opinions in the last year. So this solar eclipse is going to hit the reset button on his role with the courts, whatever has been going on in a cloaked situation with that Neptune there, and so much of what's in the court, that court is not known to us. And it is also going to hit Chiron, probably bring some things, outbursts of incredible anger. But this again hits the reset button. And then right after that happens, we have the final lunar eclipse toward the end of October that's finishing up the eclipses in Taurus and Scorpio, which deal with money and resources. Lunar eclipses are always big moments of revelation. And this is happening where Jupiter is now during this week of revelations. More will come to light. Big money, connections to big money. There isn't any indication that someone has been paying home or living expenses, as we have seen with Harlan Crow and Justice Thomas. That sort of thing would be consistent with this event, but regardless, there is something big, huge, chapter ending coming to light as a result of the eclipse in right before Halloween. So these two together, the solar eclipse hitting the reset button on whatever he's been doing with his arrangements, his agreements, that Neptune in the ninth house, and the lunar eclipse on top of the planet of currently the planet of beneficence. So this is it's going to bring something back up from what we have found out now, affecting his fourth house. And then what happens in February? Saturn will be direct, and in early February, after it goes direct, makes another sextile. Not absolutely exact, but it's there by degree. Makes another sextile to Jupiter, and what do? They each in conjunct that south node in Libra. They each have a pointer to finger of God, Yod, saying wham. Everyone look at this, everyone deal with this, time to focus on what this means. So these issues are not going away. There will be more. And whatever we're finding out this week, because of the Saturn-Jupiter sextile, and because of Jupiter being right where that October eclipse is going to happen, there is more to come, more to be developed, more to learn. Will he leave the court? I'm not going out on a limb with that, but I will say that the solar eclipse on his Neptune is definitely going to change things for him.